We could just quit right now, but y'all want to go on for a minute. We can talk a minute longer. But a couple of things that occurred to me as I was listening, and I thought how valuable this is, to be able to say, well, how about trying this? And well, what about that? Because every time you discuss one of these things, it does really make you aware, and a little more, it puts a little bit more into your experience banks, you know, and the interaction between other people. How would you do this? What do you think about this? Is an enormous growing experience. It needs to happen on a regular basis. And I thought about it. I thought, you know, and one of the reasons why Mr. Gross didn't just give you the answers is because what was precisely the answer in that given situation may not be in another one that's very close to it. As he said, we've got to rely on your judgment, but that has to be a Spirit-led judgment. It has to be an informed judgment with God's Word. It has to be a shared judgment where you ask other people and get input. But the fact of the matter is that you people who have God's Spirit, you are to be trusted. I had some people sit in my office in Tyler quite a while ago who were just brand new out of the Worldwide Church of God. And there were two couples, mature people. You know, they've been around for a long time, been in the Worldwide Church of God for many, many, many years. And one thing I told them, which kind of, you know, their eyes kind of got a little wet when I told them that. I said, you know, here I'm looking at four people who have been in the church for years, who have God's Holy Spirit, who have a lot of experience and been through all these things. If I can't trust you people to arrive at certain conclusions about your local church, who can I trust? Who can I trust? But one of the things, you know, you have God's Spirit in you, and you have your Bible, and you know what you're supposed to do. The areas where we get into problems are when we let ego get involved and when we do things for, you know, wrong motives. And it's oftentimes a good thing to call up a good close friend and say, you know, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? You think it'll be a, you know, am I letting myself get too involved in this? Is my ego bad? Once again, who needs to know? How can I share this? You know, don't be a lone ranger. You know, there's some things that you might need to talk with somebody about before you do get that far. I thought that this comment about calling them peacemakers was a very, very apt comment about these white corpuscles. We call them peacemakers, and something occurred to me I don't think very many of us think about. We think of peacemakers as being people who say, now, don't do that, or you know, as a person who just tries to make peace no matter what. But the person, actually, a person whose goal is to make peace may have to attack on certain situations. Yeah, a gun they called a peacemaker. And the reason they called it a peacemaker is because some of these guys carried around their hips said, we're going to have peace here. Little Texas Rangers, you know, whose motto was, you don't ever put on a gun unless you're willing to use it, unless you're willing to draw it, and you don't ever draw it unless you're willing to use it, and you don't ever shoot unless you shoot to kill. That was their motto. You know, don't wear it unless you're going to use it. Don't pull it out unless you're going to shoot, and don't shoot unless you're going to shoot to kill. No half measures. And you know, in a sense, you've got to have that same sort of approach in the church. Not that you're shooting to kill, but you do realize people's eternal life is at stake, and we don't go half measures. We don't go half measures. And if you're thinking about what is the right thing to do, if this is your mode of life, somebody calls you up on the church and says, you know what that woman did? You're going to say, well, no, what, before you can help yourself. But once the stuff starts coming out, if you're thinking about what's the right thing to do, realizing that there is a wrong thing to do, I got a lot of confidence you people know what to do, and that you do the right thing. If you will decide what to do instead of just doing it. And that word decide is one of the most important words that you will ever use. I am going to decide to do that. My decision is I am going to do it. In other words, making a conscious decision, it's hard to do, but it's perhaps the most important thing to do. And back to Mr. Gross's analogy of that healthy lawn, that the two factors that go into making a healthy lawn are fertilizer and water. Now, that's the big thing. You keep that lawn fertilized and cut. You know, it's got to be fertilized, watered, and cut. And you just keep fertilizing it and keep watering it and keep cutting it, and you won't have to worry about weeds. You really won't. But, you know, it is a job of a multiplicity of people. It is not the minister's job. You know, a lot of churches, you know, you got the hired gun who's your minister. He's the man up front. You pay him, and he does all these things for you. You know, but that ain't the way it is. It's not the way it's going to be. It's not going to work that way. We're all going to work on it. Fertilizer to us means teaching and learning and explaining and the Word of God, right? And water, you know, that's also the Word of God, but it involves the Holy Spirit. Water, biblically speaking, is a type of the Holy Spirit. You've got to have that here. And that cutting, that grooming, that's the sort of thing you do get from, you know, preaching and correction and instruction in righteousness. And somebody saying, you know, we have done this a lot in our lives, but it's not the way to go. Let's look at a better way. The keeping of the grass cut, not getting shaggy and so forth. This is something which involves the work of a minister, but it also involves the work of all of you folks as well. And I guess what we're after in coming out and doing these seminars is to tell as many people as we can, we expect you to work, to have a healthy church. We expect you to do what you do well, and we're going to try to do what we do well. And if we hang in there and we hang together on it, we can accomplish something really worthwhile. We can build with gold and silver and precious stones. We don't have to build with wood, hay, and stubble. And we don't have to see this whole thing burned down around our ears because we neglected some things that we knew to do and could have done and should have done. And really hope to never get to a situation where some terrible disaster has struck your local church and you just say, oh, if only I had whatever that is. Those are sad, sad words. Well, thank all of you for coming out and joining us in this thing today. We are going, yes, we do want your seminar registrations. We are going to continue this theme in Spartanburg tomorrow. Again, with a great deal more. Mr. Gross has some additional material. I've got 7 pages of notes that I've done on some stuff that I really want to go into. Are any of you coming down to Spartanburg tomorrow, by the way?
Spartanburg tomorrow, yeah.
Good. Well, we'll see all of you down there, and thanks for coming.
I do have one question.
Okay.
You said to fill out the registration form. Yes.
Okay. We're going to do a little role playing today. As all of you, I think by now know, the Church of God International is a little different from the Worldwide Church of God, if you happen to have had any association with that. It is also different from a lot of other churches. But we're learning a lot of things now that some churches learned a long time ago. The Baptists and Assemblies of God and so forth have learned a lot more about what I call intra-church relationships than we've learned, because of the fact that those people are basically free. They have the right to come and go. They have the right to their opinions. They have a democratic style, let's say, process of church government. They have encountered difficulties that churches like perhaps the Catholic Church or the Worldwide Church of God have managed to submerge if they have not solved them. We have then, in the process of time, come to encounter a lot of those things and begun to have difficulties with them because there's some things we haven't learned that other people have. But as time goes by, we're beginning to pick up on it and beginning to develop some concepts I think that will be of value to us. Today, as I say, I want to do just a little bit of role playing, and we're going to, in a moment, going to play a little game. But the assumptions we're going to deal here with is that you're a local congregation of people. You've been meeting right in here around Spartanburg for quite a little while. Been having, a little television, a video on the Sabbath, and there's been no minister in the area. Now I'm living, or maybe my company has transferred me about 25 miles down the road down here, and I'm working down here now in this area. And one of you folks comes to me and said, Mr. Darn, we would really like to have a minister in our church. And we wonder if you would come up and serve as our minister. Now, what do you think at this point? Should I accept that offer, that request? Should I give in to that? So I say, yeah, I'll be glad to. Initially, you'd say, well, of course. I mean, why wouldn't I? I mean, yeah, I'd be glad to come down. My impulse would be to say, of course. I would be happy to be your minister. I would be happy to serve with you folks. I'll be there next Sabbath. Is that a good idea? Should it work that way? Now, because I'm asking you the question, you've all been made wary, right? Maybe it shouldn't work that way. But up until this time in the Church of God International, it pretty well has worked that way. In fact, if I had said to those people, why do you want me? You'd look at me like I was stupid. For the simple reason, there ain't nobody else here. You know, what do you mean, why you? There's no other minister. You're the only, we've been meeting without one all this time. You think we've been meeting without one because we wanted to? There hasn't been one. Here you are. Now, would I shock you if I tell you that the fact that I am the only minister that could serve your church is not good enough reason for me to be the minister that does serve your church? Does that shock you? Okay. Why then wouldn't I? And what are the factors that might be involved in it? And what should we know about one another? You see, an awful lot of the problems that arise in the Church of God International, in fact, just about any interacting group of people that exist, are problems of expectations. You come to me and you say, would you come down here and be our minister? And I say, sure, I'll be here next Sabbath. I'm going to show up in this room with certain expectations. As you anticipate my arrival here to be your minister, you are going to look forward to my being here with certain expectations. What happens if your expectations and my expectations don't match up? We're going to have problems. We're going to have a lot of confusion. Because the fact of the matter is you all have already been meeting together, and this is also a critical factor. You've already been meeting together, and you've already begun to develop a kind of a relationship and a spirit, if you will, a mindset, a method of operation, a kind of a way of interacting with one another. I'm going to come in here with a totally different style. And my style, my approach is going to be very different, and I'm going to try to, come in here, and if I expect to make things work my way, I may have a problem. And I may create resentment here and there from people who really are kind of comfortable with the way they do things. They like their congregation the way it is. They don't necessarily, they want me to come in and be their minister, but they don't want me to go overhauling the whole place right this first week I get here. So there are certain things that we need to know. And these expectations and these frustrated expectations are the source of a lot of our difficulties. And like I've said before, there are difficulties that in other kinds of organizations might get papered over. We can't paper them over. We've got to deal with them. And in the process of dealing with them, I think we're going to grow a lot and come to understand a lot, maybe change in ways that we needed to change, and I think be a lot stronger Christians than we ever should do. Now, what I think you and I ought to do, instead of me just saying, yeah, I'll come be your minister, I say, look, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's get together next Sabbath, after you've played your videotape and had your services. Let's have a meeting and let's discuss whether I ought to be your minister or not. Now then, I have some questions that I want to ask you. Do you suppose you might have any questions you'd want to ask me? All right, here we are. You said, what would you like to ask me? I'm going to be your minister. What do you want to know?
Well, I'd want to know your position on the doctrines of the church as far as the holy day, the Sabbath day.
I think
your
that's...
educational background, a lot of things.
Okay, you want to know my educational background? Naturally, I'm going to give you the whole works. Here's where I was, here's what I did, and so forth. Now, doctrinal, let's talk about the ones that, in my opinion, we can discuss this way, because this is an important question, by the way. In your opinion, what are the doctrines in the church, the corpus of doctrines, that are the most likely to be a source of conflict or problem? Why would I put the question that way? Tell me.
There's different doctrines, of course, that face I'm trying to
well,
the particular
yeah,
one.
Yeah, well, the particular ones, I mean, I think if you don't have to think very far, they are the Sabbath, the holy days, and tithing, unclean meats, which isn't even in our Statement of Doctrines booklet, but which is basically perceived as a pretty central thing, and one that is likely to cause a question because of a tape that's been circulating around among them, about the question. Otherwise, it might not. And I think everybody would say, let's get this cleared up right off the bat so we understand where you are coming from. Fair questions. All of them fair. And I think that before you all, sign up on one of those charter applications that says, yeah, we request that Ronald L be made our minister, you have a right to know how I feel about those things. So and you have a right for me not to waltz around you on them. Right? Tell you the truth, how I feel from the core. That way, you're not going to be sitting around guessing about it. And if somebody comes rolling in here and says, well, boy, don't you know what Dart believes? You haven't heard how Dart feels about this. After you've already made your charter application with my name prominently displayed there in the middle of it. And he said, well, no, I didn't. But the fact is, see, if that's been done, Sure, you say, sure, I know what he believes on it. We talked about that. We talked about it at great length. And what you're saying he believes ain't so. So that sort of thing gets it cleared up. Now, what are the kind of questions you think you might want to ask me? Yeah.
Your willingness to serve and your accessibility to the people.
That's an important question. That's a very important question. Well, folks, I have a job. It's a demanding one. I'm in sales with a chemical company. John Pinkston is an illustration of this. And I travel a lot. My average working day runs about 14 hours. You know, so, I don't know if John's is quite that long. But, you know, some sales type persons can be doing that. I'm out of town 3 days a week, and when I get back, there's a lot of pressure on my family. I will not be available like a full-time minister would. I may not even be as much available as a semi-retired minister would. But I will be here for you on the Sabbath day. You know, you can call me. You know, if you have something you really need to call me about, call me. Just, you know, I'll trust you. If you will not call me about things that can wait till the Sabbath day, I will always take your calls. Can we live with this? If you can live with that, we're okay. See, if that's a problem to you, then let's understand it up front. That way we have an understanding, and nobody's going to get their feelings hurt, you know, about my not being available or the fact that I have to miss. You all schedule a potluck, you know, get together, big wing-ding on Wednesday night one night, and that's the night after I get back about 6 o'clock in the evening after having been gone on the road for a solid week. And I tell you, you know, I'm sorry, folks, I got to spend that with my family. None of you are going to get your feelings hurt or feel that I don't love you, because I made it clear up front that I can only serve you to the limits of, you know, within certain limitations. If we understand that, we have no problem. If we don't get that understanding up front, guess what? We're going to have hurt feelings. Do you have another question? Okay. Yes.
I would want to know if the minister was actually felt like he was called of God to preach, or whether he was doing it for his own vain glory, which would be a hard question to ask someone.
No, it's not a hard question to ask. It's a hard question if you add the latter part to it. But if you say to the man, do you believe that God called you to the ministry, you have asked a valid question. You have asked a valid question. Because to me, you've asked me. Yes, I believe that God called me to the ministry. This call, you know, to me, I felt this a long time ago. I couldn't tell you exactly when the first awareness of it came upon me. Now, if you want to know how I know, well, it would be very difficult for me to tell you that too, because I don't think it's, you know, I heard no voice in the night. If I had, I think you should wonder about that. I heard no voice in the night. There was nobody came to me with anything. It was just that initially perhaps it was a desire. Initially it was a desire. But then as I went along, I began to realize that the talents were there to go with the desire. Then as time passed, I realized that the gifts were there to go with the talents to go with the desire. And, you know, other people who were in the ministry recognized the desire and the talents and the gifts. And it was a matter of time before men who were in the ministry said, yeah, Dart has been called to the ministry. He needs to be in the ministry. And they ordained me. Since that time, I feel that God's blessing has been upon me. I have grown. He has given me additional gifts, which I haven't worked for. They're just there. And I know that they are there. And I believe that God has called me to the ministry. Do I feel? Now, if you want to pry a little deeper, there's an important question a person might ask at this point. And by the way, there's nobody here at stake in any of this. This is going on tape for everybody to think about downstream. There's another question. Under what circumstances do you feel you could walk away from that call? That a tough question? Henry, under what circumstances do you think you could walk away from that call?
Well, at this point in time, it would be very difficult to walk away from it. Or the ideas crossed my mind. But
I don't doubt it for a minute.
It has.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I think the one Sabbath that the guy that was demon possessed tried to kill me and my family.
That got your attention, yeah.
Really, the thoughts through my mind that morning was basically, is this working? Should I get out of the ministry?
Yeah.
The guy got my attention.
Vernon, do you believe you can walk away from it?
I don't think so.
Vernon said he doesn't even believe he can. I don't think Henry believes he can. Yeah. I don't believe I can. See, now when you've gotten these answers out of a guy, have you learned anything about his commitment? Yeah, you really have, haven't you? He learned that he's in a ministry, and this is another important thing. See, I'm not going to be in a ministry in this church because I'm being paid for it. Now, at this moment, I happen to be. I don't have to be, but if I'm going to have time to do what I'm doing with you people, I'm going to have to be. But if you were asking me to come down and be just your minister of record for a church this size, I would reply to you and say, look, if I'm going to serve you, it's going to be because I believe that I am called to be a minister. Here's a place where a ministry is needed, and if we can work together, I really want to work with you. And I believe in it, and I can't walk away from the calling of the ministry. It's an important question, and I'm glad that you want to know that. I think any local church would want to know that. What other questions would you want to ask me if I was thinking? Yeah.
What kinds of things do you expect us to do on our own? What kind of growth do you expect us to have, and how much babysitting do we need?
Very good question. Very good question. And that's something that would need some discussion. Now, for those who probably couldn't hear that, she says, how much, was it growth? How much growth do you expect us to accomplish or to initiate or work on our own? I'm not sure how I would answer that question. That's one I need to think about a little bit. Because it's going to come out of a question that I'm going to ask you, see, because you all are asking me lots of questions right now. I got some for you when we get along in this conversation a little bit. But I do think that's important, is of the development of the work that this church is going to do. What am I going to do, and what are you going to do, are two very important questions. And if we don't understand that, what you expect of me and what I expect of you, we are on a collision course. Somewhere down the line, we're going to have a problem. Let's talk about that at the point where we're interviewing one another to say, and having this little meeting and talk over it, do we really want to get together about this? Now, just to get to some of my questions, and I'll let you pop up with some of yours as we go along in this type of thing. One of the things that I want to know, and I wouldn't ask the question this way, but I've got to find a way to find out, is who's who in this congregation? Who is who in this congregation? Who are the opinion leaders? Who are the movers and shakers? Who are the influential people? I'll tell you, it's important to know, and for reasons that you might not suspect, who are the strongest and largest contributors to the local church fund. Now, why would I need to know that? What possible value could that be to me as a minister to know that? Gene? Pardon? It's a very important indication of commitment on that person's part. What else, though? Vernon came up with it, but I'll let you go first.
Shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility? Yeah. Vernon?
It could be a controlling factor.
Could be a controlling factor. It can also tell you that here's a person, heavy contributor, that if you start running contrary to what he wants to do, might have this proprietary interest in the congregation and create difficulties. So, what do we do about that when we come to know who that person is? Talk to him. We'll get an understanding, about things that go along, and be sure that you're aware of what's cooking. You don't let somebody buy the church. I think that's a very important consideration. I'll tell you another thing it can also identify for you. I don't know if you've thought about this, but it can identify a person who's got bad attitude toward the home office, and he's contributing all of his funds locally and contributing nothing to support the overall effort of the church nationally. Now, he can do that if he wants to. It's his privilege, and nobody's going to beat him about the head and shoulders for that. It's just something worth knowing. Here's a guy whose heart is involved in the local church and is not involved beyond it. And the Church of God International, we are committed to a work beyond the local church. And a local church must have that commitment or it should not hold a charter. If you're going to be a local church, and if that's all you're going to be, then be that, please. Declare your independence and go get the world, eat up your community, get after them. But don't pretend to be, a charter church of the Church of God International involved with an international outreach effort and wholeheartedly in it when you're not. We all got to agree on that. That's another thing that we want to know about each other before I'm your minister. Is where is your heart? Where is your commitment? Where are you people really wanting to do your work? If you're just a local group of people and that's all you're ever going to be, I have other things to do. I have a different commitment from that. And we're going to have problems if that's the way it is. In fact, I would say right now that we have some churches around the country where we have some tension in the churches. And I would say that in the majority of the situations, most of that tension exists between people who are committed to the work of the Church of God International and the people who are not. Some people disguise that situation under a kind of an anti-administration bias. congregation is where do the talents lie? Who's good at what? Now, I don't know we're going to find that out in this meeting, but I need to know that somehow. Maybe it's a question for me to ask. Okay, in this congregation, who does what? You know, who does what? Is there anybody in here who basically is the musical person? Just this is real now. Who's musical in this group? Who plays an instrument? Nobody? We have one who plays an instrument back in the back. We have. Okay, everybody's being yes. He fakes it a little bit. Okay. Do y'all ever have church? Does this local church ever have special music? Have special? Who does that? All right, aha, back here. Okay, we have special music back there. Okay, these are talents in the local congregation that we have. Who gives sermonettes? All people give sermonettes. Up, hands up. Let's know who gives sermonettes in here. Who gives sermons? Okay, it's all of a sudden now I know things I didn't know when I walked in the room, just by asking those questions alone. Who signs checks? Nobody? Yeah, 1, 2, signs checks. 3. Oh, we've got some people here who sign checks. Okay, who are members of local church councils? Okay, more all of us. See, I'm picking up information as we go along. Now, it's going to become very important for me, if I'm going to work with you people, to come to know how you all relate with one another and how all that works and who to get to. Okay, who is... First of all, I've already mentioned this to some degree, but somehow or other in my discussions with you, I want to find out where your commitments lie. I want to find out just where is this church committed, what's it committed to, and how is it going to work with them. I don't know. How would I find that out, reckon? How could I find out where your commitments are without, I've already mentioned the fact who's the largest contributor and what's your local church fund look like, because that's an important question to know. You come along some local church that's just basically making ends meet and meeting their expenses and going on. You have a reason to assume that they're probably helping out down in home office somewhat. You get a church that's building up a local fund to a heavy level, then you say to yourself, and I would say to you in the meeting, I say, what are you all planning to do? What are your goals? I notice that you all are putting together quite a bit of money. What are you going to do with it? There's several answers that can come back, all legitimate. Well, we're planning on a local campaign, and we've already talked to Charlie Gross about it, and we've got to have some money for hall rental here and some ads we want to run, and so forth and so on. All fine. You want to know that's what's cooking. Going to build a local church building. Fine, no problem. That's something that churches in the CGI are going to be doing in the years to come. In fact, we are working on some models and some procedures for speeding up that process and making it work a little better, and not impacting the overall cash flow of the work in the process. And we think we've got some good ideas. We want to know that that's what you got in mind. And, because as I step in here and I start helping you with this, I have certain priorities and certain concepts of things that I think we ought to be doing and getting after. You have certain concepts that may be different, and we need to understand one another. We don't even have to come to an agreement, but we do have to come to understand. I got to know what you have in mind and why and so forth and so on, and you need to know why I feel differently about it and how I feel that way, how I came to feel that way, and how strong my feelings are on it. And then we need to understand, can we work together on that basis? In most cases, we can. And there will be no difficulties because we understand each other. As long as what is being done is honorable. Honorable. And there are, conceivably, approaches that could be taken that might not be. Another question I might ask you, if this were the case, who was the previous minister that you had in this area? Who was here before me? Now, if I know the man, I can talk to him and I can find out a great deal about you. If I don't know the man, it's not so easy to do that. Another question, we're going to have to be real honest here. Were there any contentions over this previous minister? Now, should I be asking that question? Is that a bad thing? I see heads nodding. That's not a bad thing? Okay, why should I ask that question? You agreed with me. What is your reason?
Well, it might help you to maybe go through the same mistakes between the people and the minister. You might find out the areas where
absolutely
dialogue broke down between the two and not fall in the same trap again.
Not fall in the same trap, make the same mistakes, fall in the same pit. It's all just as obvious as it can be. Yes, sir.
About asking the former minister, what the problems were or anything. wouldn't that be sort of prejudiced in your case against, just without going in there just cold, I know that you would get a feel of that, but each person is different.
Not
like you and Ted are different.
Very.
But the way he would handle a situation, the way you would handle a situation would be two different things.
That's true, and I think there is that risk. In my own opinion, it's outweighed by the importance, though, of knowing what it was that you were upset with him about. Something you might not have ever told him. Do you believe that would happen? You better believe it would happen. It will happen. And we need to talk about this before we get involved, and I think it's important that we do. Now, I don't mean to badmouth the poor fellow. He's gone on down the road. We don't want to I want to make it very clear before we start talking about him. What I want to know is what your problems were and how you felt. And we're not going to assassinate old Henry's character after he's left. But I know that there was some tension between you all and Henry. And let's talk about it a minute, because I don't want to create the same tensions with you. Do you feel good about the fact that I don't want to create the same tensions? Sure. I feel that I have a right to know what the problem was. Because if I'm not going to be any different from Henry, you have a right to know that today, and not 6 months from now when you're frustrated and aggravated and can't get the ministerial council to move off a dime to make a change. So I would say let's talk about it, where the problem was, so that we don't make that same mistake. If I'm going to be just like Henry, and I'll probably be too much like him, for some people, well, then we're going to have a problem. And let's talk about it, and let's see if we can work our way around it. Who knows, if you'd been able to talk about it with Henry, everything had been fine with Henry before he got transferred out. Yes, sir. Oh, I thought I saw a hand. That didn't. Okay. What are the issues in this church? Are there any? Are there any things that in this church that we've been working on around here that are now let's sweep all of the real things out of this group here, and let's see if you can come up with me some imaginary issues that might exist in our little imaginary church here. And I say to you folks, now let's be real honest today with each other. What are the differences of opinion that exist in this church? Give me an imaginary difference of opinion.
One is to whether to be chartered or not.
Okay. This church is struggling over the question of whether to be chartered or not. Now, I want to tell you right up front, I'm your candidate minister here, that's important to me. Because if the church is not going to proceed toward charter, I can't serve you. In fact, the time will come when I think the ministry in the church, and I suspect, I can't do this unilaterally, but I suspect the ministry will do it when it comes down to it, are eventually going to decide that Church of God International ministers will not serve in churches that are not proceeding toward charter. Would you think that's a possibility? That will not serve in churches that direction, who will not serve in independent churches. So this is an issue that we're going to have to talk about right now as to whether or not this church is going to proceed toward charter. I won't take you down that road right now, but I will say that's a very important issue. There are people in this church who want to be chartered, and there are people in this church who do not. Okay, at that point in time, we're going to circle the chairs, and we're going to sit down and say, okay, what are the questions? Why don't you want to be chartered? What are your motives? What are your concerns? And we're going to work that question out before we go any further. What other issues might exist in a local church?
The method and style of worship.
Okay.
Program.
The program. Some people feel that we ought to use a different outline for services, and other people feel we should be one. Okay, let's then see. This is an important thing, because I'm going to come in here with certain opinions, and here's what I'm going to want to do as your minister. Is that going to be acceptable? And we'll have to work that out. What other issues might exist in this church? Yes, sir.
How do you deal with problems like someone who is not with us but wants to come to church with us?
Okay, how do you deal with, say, a problem person who may either have an attitude problem or who may be sinning in an overt way and wants to come to church, and some of us feel we should let him and some of us feel we should not? That's an issue. That could be a very divisive issue in a local church. You know, when you think about it, the moment of time when you're thinking about getting together as a church and minister is an awful good time to sort out a lot of stuff, isn't it? You can get a lot of junk sorted out. Saying, okay, what are the issues? What are the things that this church disagrees over? And let's gather our chairs around, let's sit down, and let's talk about this and see if we can't come to an understanding of it. A lot of times we let these things drift on for, months and years and never get around to saying anything about it. I would want to know if I'm going to come in here, I would have to ask certain questions which are going to tell me whether or not this church is inward or outward looking. In other words, are you as a church more concerned, about just your activities and your church and your local things here, or are you concerned about other church areas? Now, there are some clues to this that I pick up on along the way. For example, it is the policy in the Church of God International that the ministry are responsible for making arrangements about the annual holy days. In other words, it is not the duty of a local church council to have anything to do with the site or location of annual holy days. If I find a, excuse me, yes? It is the policy, as I said, for the ministry to make that decision. If I find a local church saying, no, we're not going to cooperate with that. I know that Henry and Vernon here have decided, along with Chris, that we're going to have the Holy Day services over in such and such a location. But one person or more of a local congregation says, well, that's going to leave out some people down here in this such a place, and they sort of just let you guys know that, well, we're going to have the Days of Unleavened Bread over here, rather than even consulting, but just let you know that this is what we're going to do. Now, if I learn this about this local church, I have come to the conclusion that we have a fairly substantial number of people who are inward in their orientation. They are not oriented toward the Church of God International as a whole and as a group. Now, I don't think I need to defend the question of what I'm talking about here, but I will take just a moment to do so. One of the things that I personally am concerned about as the Secretary of the Ministerial Council and as a leader in the ministry of the Church of God International is that this church and local churches in the world, in the Church of God International, are aware of the fact that they are a part of a larger whole, and that they think in terms of participating as a part of that larger whole, which means that when holy days times come, these are the times when we want to pull local churches together. We want to uproot you from your 52-week out of the year environment. We don't want you just doing the same thing on holy days that you do every other Sabbath day. We don't want you sitting on your backsides and staying at home and taking it easy. We want you to get up and go somewhere and be with more people in a larger group and have a really special day. We want that to happen. We don't want feast sites to be cropping up all over the country to where we have 78 of them, in the contiguous United States. We don't want that. We want these feast sites to be larger, and we want people to have to get up and go there. It does a lot of things. It presents problems for you as a local church. It's supposed to present problems for you. That's the idea. The idea is to keep you aware of the fact that you're temporary in this world and that you're sojourners and that you're supposed to learn. It's part of our job to get up and to go, and that it's part of our job to help those poor people get up and go as well. Not leave them behind, but to get them, or for you to stay back there and hold services for them. It's for you to get busy, gather up some other people, and get those people to the feast. That's part of the work. So this is a part of it. I mean, if I find local churches that keep wanting to stay home, and it's all under the guise of doing something good for these poor people who can't go, or these old people that can't go, or what have you. But you see, you're not really doing good. What you are doing is dividing the church. Because the church, the whole church, is moving in this direction under the guidance of its ministry. And the local church council should not be interfering in the work of the ministry. And messing around with holy day services and Feast of Tabernacles is messing around with the work of the ministry. And this is something we've all got to come to understand, and hopefully as time goes on we all will understand. But at a juncture where we are about to make a decision for me to be your minister, this is a time for us to understand each other on this. I am a minister who is affiliated with the Church of God International. I'm a minister of Jesus Christ first. But I have voluntarily affiliated myself with and accepted credentials from the Church of God International, and I accept the leadership of that group of ministry. I am submissive to them. Now this is something that all of you know about me, even in my job. I am subject to the ministerial council and the ministry at large of the Church of God International, voluntarily and willingly. And if I were coming to candidate for you as a minister, I want you to know that. I'm not an independent minister. I can be if I want to be. And if I decide to be, I will declare that right up front. to you, the ministerial council, the minister, and everybody else. Until I have done that, you all can just assume I'm a card-carrying, credentialed minister of the Church of God International. I will act as such. So that's what you're asking for, to come to be your minister, and that's what you're going to get. So let's understand each other right up front. And the Church of God International has goals, which I believe are approved by Jesus Christ, or I wouldn't have anything to do with them. We have objectives along the way toward those goals, which I also believe are approved by Jesus Christ and are biblical and everywhere. I wouldn't be recommending them or doing them, and so on and so forth. This is the way we are going to go. This is the way, the ministry in the Church of God International is going to go. And God has invested the leadership in His church in the ministry. So we're going to understand each other, hopefully, as a local church, and we're going to be able to do these things as a local church. The beautiful thing is now that in the Church of God International we have got in place all sorts of ways of handling the problems that can arise with this. There are obviously problems that could arise, but we have ways of handling them. If I start teaching false doctrine as your minister, your first obligation is to come to me and talk to me about it. That's the first thing you need to do. Come talk, write a letter, and whatever. If you don't get any satisfaction, bring a witness. Still don't get any satisfaction, write a letter, document every word, send it to the Secretary of the Ministerial Council. Today, that's me. And we will help you sort out your difficulty. And there is, we have avenues in the Church of God International for straightening out things. We have avenues for sorting out doctrinal questions. We have avenues for sorting out leadership problems. And there isn't any reason for anybody to go off half-cocked and get upset, leave the church, or take a whole church with them, or what have you, over perceived doctrinal or personality or leadership questions in CGI. There are ways whereby it can be handled. So anyway, I want to know is the church inward-looking or outward-looking? And I will have to find ways of finding that out. And it's a good thing, I think, for all of you to take a look at yourselves and answer that question. I also would like to know if there are any doctrinal issues in this congregation. Is there anything going on here that I ought to know before I walk in here? For example, do we have in this congregation, let's all be honest, do we have in this congregation people who believe that the Passover should be observed on the 15th instead of on the 14th? This is a point where we're going to have to get right down to talking about it. Because I don't want to come in here and assume that we are all of one mind and one heart on this issue and find out that I've got one or two or three families here, and usually it's only about one or two, if there is any, who believe that way. Now, that may not keep me from coming, to work with you people, but I want to understand where that issue is there so I can address it. I want to know who the people are who feel that way so I can talk to them, so I can sit down and work with them. If you're ever asked, one of you fellows are ever asked to help a congregation like that, spend a little time and find out so that you don't wind up getting blindsided down the road. It will be just as true if we wind up with a congregation, let's say over in Columbia, where you get a bunch of worldwide Church of God people who all come out at once. You would think, well, I can assume that all those people are sound doctrinally on the holy days tithing, and go right down the line of the doctrines. Oh, no, you can't. You cannot assume that, because the worldwide Church of God has papered over all that stuff and have scared those people into keeping their mouths shut and keeping their head down. All of a sudden, they're free from that. And a lot of worldwide Church of God people really do a lot of thrashing around, doctrinally, mentally, and spiritually, before they find themselves and settle down and say, here is what I believe. So it would be a serious mistake to go charging into a group of, say, 15 families of worldwide Church of God and say, well, this group here is going to be real solid, doctrinally at least. No, it won't work that way. If there are going to be any issues, you want to find out about them ahead of time. A lot of those people have made a lot of sacrifices over the years in order to keep the holy days. And when they leave the worldwide Church of God, they start thinking, did I really have to do that? Was that really important? Did I do that because God said so, or did it because the church said so? And in most cases, they're going to conclude they did it because the church said so. And they're going to have to find their way back around the question again to doing things because God said so, instead of because the church said so. And so even in all circumstances, if you're being asked to work with a group of people as a minister, or if you as a people are getting a minister working with you, don't be surprised if he says, do you all believe in keeping the holy days? Do you all really believe that it's commanded of God and that if we're going to be obedient to God, we must keep them? And let's understand, because I do. I do. And if you don't, and I get up here preaching sermons about it, which I am going to do, it's going to make you uncomfortable. So let's talk. Let's get all this stuff squared away. Are there any outreach issues in this local congregation? Now, what do I mean by that? I mean differences of opinion about how you ought to reach out to your community. What sort of media things? Are we having a fight here over advertising our fair booths? Are we having a fight here over whether we should or whether we should try to get money for a local television station here, or whether we ought to save it up for a campaign or build a, do we have this kind of thing going on? Let's talk about it. Let's get it understood before we get going in this thing. Now, there are a lot of other ways I could go in this discussion, and the main thing that we're doing here is we are getting a dialogue going. These are things to bring up so that questions can be raised, so that we can talk, so that before we get involved in something together, we understand each other, so we can know how to work together from here. I would want to know, first of all, why do you want to minister? Would you mind telling me why you want to minister in this local congregation? We're imagining, role playing again.
All right. I think the minister is, to perform, to teach us the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody doesn't believe 100%. Maybe me and you have difference on prophecy or something like that. But we can fellowship together, and you can teach me things, and back and forth. And I think also it's for outreach, because I don't feel like I'm qualified as a lay member just to bring somebody into church, and you as a minister ought to be qualified and stable enough to bring a sinner to repentance and accept Jesus Christ, and to accept the teachings that Jesus taught.
Okay, in other words, you feel that we could have new people coming along and visiting church here and watching the videos and fellowshipping with us, but that you feel that maybe we would not have the skills to really counsel with this person and sit down with him, or even that there would be anybody here that he would feel he ought to go to. That's another consideration. If we have no minister in the congregation, which one of us does he decide to talk to about being baptized, if he's thinking about it? If you have a minister there, the funny thing about it, not only does he know who to talk to about being baptized, he has more of a prompting to be baptized, doesn't he? The very presence of the minister is in itself a prompt. What are the reasons? Yeah.
Well, basically, we want someone to be able to anoint, baptize, counsel, basically to serve our needs, teach.
Mary Berry. Yeah. Right?
I certainly would want a minister to teach me.
Yeah.
Because no way would I be able to have the depth of understanding and insight into the Scriptures.
How would you go about determining if the man you want to come here and be with you was apt to teach? Because, isn't that a requirement of a bishop? Which you're telling me, a pastor is a bishop. Let's make no mistake about it. He is a man, because a pastor is an overseer.
If he sounded a little bit like Mr. Ronald L.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. You're very kind. But that's not where the boundaries are. It's such a logical way.
Just sit down there and talk to him.
Yeah, to some extent.
Go and listen to him in his his old congregation.
Sure, or invite him to yours. See, you don't have to invite a man to be your pastor to ask him if he'd mind come preach to you on Sabbath. And most of the guys, I'd be over there and say, sure, I got something I've been working on here for about 6 months. I had no place to say it. Because you may find a man doesn't have a church that he speaks at. He just happens to have been moved into your area and doesn't know anybody. So invite him over. Say, hey, we would sure like to have you come preach to us. You haven't gotten married just because you got on a date. See, and a little courtship is in order here. Let's find out, because you really have a reason to know. In one sense of the word, what I'm saying to you here is there's no reason, just because a minister is down the road from you, that you necessarily need to invite him to be your pastor. Just invite him to fellowship with you and speak to you. You'd love to hear him preach, and let him preach, over a period of time. And what you'll find is, in that situation, you can grow to love each other. And it's like getting married. If you grow to love each other, then the relationship will be the most natural thing in the world. And I think that there is a relationship of love between minister and people, and I think that it's something that needs to be there. And you get married before you fall in love. It isn't always the best thing to do, is it? Now, an awful lot of our churches, minister and church kind of grow up together, and that's also a very legitimate thing. It's not a question of here's a group, and there is no minister, and now there's one available. I think that's the case probably down here in the Woodruff area, and in some of the areas where you've been too. I think it's been that case. It's just we're just all here, and the minister's even involved in the first place in kind of drawing all these people, and they grow up together. It's the most natural thing to get. We've got childhood sweethearts, as it were, to follow the analogy through a little further. But I'm talking about some general principles, which I think the principle can fall out in another direction. As I said before, why do you want to minister? Is an important question to ask. Why this minister is another important question to ask. Why me? Now, naturally, I'm the only one here. Nobody else in this particular neck of the woods. So that question it doesn't work too good at that particular point in time. But you still need to kind of focus in on that fact that I am not just a minister. I am a man. I have a name. I was born in Harrison, Arkansas. I was reared in Houston, Texas. I went into the Navy for 4 years. I went to Ambassador College. I went to Hardin-Simmons for 2 years and Ambassador College for 3. I hold a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Ambassador College. I've taught college for 7 years. I was the director of Church Administration Department for the Worldwide Church of God. I was the director of the foreign work for the Worldwide Church of God. I was a member of the Board of Trustees of the Worldwide Church of God, the Board of Trustees of Ambassador College. And I was Deputy Chancellor of Ambassador College Big Sandy for 2 years, and then Director of Church Administration for 2 years. Are you sure you want me to come in and work with you folks? I have got an awful Worldwide Church of God background. You don't find many more deep than that. If you got people that are kind of resentful of Worldwide Church of God, I'm going to be a problem. Because I've repented of some of that. I've repented of the part of it that needs to be repented of. And not all of it needs to be. Not all of it needs to be, because we did some good work in different places at different times along the way. And we also did some that wasn't so good. Now let me get back to some more questions that are a little easier. That we're going to have a little fun with this one. Okay, tell me now. How long have we been meeting together as a congregation here? 5? How long has the Woodruff Church been around here? 6 years. 6 years. You people have been meeting together down here for about 6 years. What is the most significant event in the life of this church? Really? I'm not imagining. Now tell me, what's the most significant event in the life of this church? Come on. Has there been no significant event in the life of this church? Or maybe, yeah?
And this, our 5-year anniversary, Mr. Dark came.
No. Oh, okay. That was a nice day. I enjoyed that day. I really did. That was a lot of fun that day.
I think the most significant event, it's not one event. It's the new people that never been connected with the Worldwide Church.
Yeah.
Or Church God International has come in to accept Jesus as their Savior and to go on with more understanding of the Bible.
From your perspective, then, seeing these new people come in is exciting to you and encouraging to you. Yeah, I can see that. It's not exactly a point. It's a kind of activity rather than a given activity. Yeah.
I'm just so glad to hear Jesus. We've just been in the Worldwide for 5 years, but I never heard Jesus talk, and it was just so thrilling to me that he is.
Yeah. That's an important difference. An important difference. Yeah.
It choked up when I see the baptism, which infant baptism kind of together, a lot of times at feasts and convention and seminars. It's nice to see new people coming in and the commitments they have, and especially a lot of them are older people, not just young people. Like you see in Baptist religions, a certain age they get baptized. It's great. It's nice to see that commitment.
And another thing too, 2 or 3, the Atlanta church started from there, and Statesville Church and Bob by him moving
spin-off churches.
Churches.
Yeah. Bob.
One of the, thinking more physically, one of the solidifying factors was the building of the building.
The building of the building, yeah. Pulled everybody together. Now, what I'm hearing, I'm learning some stuff here about significant things. I'm learning what's important to you people, and what I'm learning about your values and things you think are important are things I share with you. So therefore, I'm encouraged, that we can work together. Because people who are thrilled about hearing Jesus preach for a change, and people who are thrilled by seeing people baptized and come into the church and new people being converted, these are values that I share. And therefore, I can see this is important to this church. Now, that being the case, I come down here and I think, okay, let's start thinking about what we're going to do about this.